The recovery of the peregrine falcon is an excellent example of the Endangered Species Act at work. Unfortunately, success stories are the exception. As man encroaches on the environment, more and more plants and animals are in need of protection. This year in Idaho, 3 wild runs of salmon have been added to the threatened and endangered species list.
The numbers are frightening. Last fall, only 4 adult sockeye salmon returned here to their birthplace in the Sawtooth Mountains. In the fall of 1990, there were none. No question, sockeye salmon teeter on the edge of extinction. And Chinook salmon aren't far behind. In 1962, almost 28,000 fall Chinook returned from the ocean destined for Idaho. Last fall, there were 318. Returning spring and summer Chinook have dropped from 66,000 in 1962 to less than 6,000. The great historic fish runs have gone the way of the buffalo.
And I can't understand why we can't learn from things that have happened before. I mean, this is really a difficult thing. I mean, it's very possible that we could lose salmon, wild salmon, hatchery salmon in Idaho.
Studies have shown that the main threat to the salmon is the hydroelectric system on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. Up to 95% of the small fish simply do not make it to the ocean. They need the push of a river to send them downstream. Without water flow, they become lost in the large reservoirs created by the dams. Currently, in compliance with the Endangered Species Act, a team set up by the National Marine Fisheries Service is developing a recovery plan for the salmon. But in the meantime, research biologists are exploring the possibility of other threats to the salmon runs. For example, when wild salmon fry begin to emerge from their gravel nests in mid-April, they're less than 1.5 inches long. Do they become prey for larger fish?
It's a whitefish.
Fish and game research biologists Craig Contour and Dave Canamilla are electrofishing. The umbrella-like devices hanging in the front of the boat create an electric field that momentarily stuns the fish.
The simplest way to say it is it makes their muscles contract in such a way that they swim towards the electrode. And then when they get closer, then they'll become unconscious. They roll on their belly. Sucker there.
The search is for steelhead smolts. About 1 million hatchery-raised fish are released into the Salmon River each spring to make their way to the ocean.
The steelhead smolts are typically around 10 inches or so. They're big enough to eat Chinook fry. There is potential. Physically, they're physically capable. Now, whether or not that happens is not really well documented.
By mid-June, most of the steelhead smolts have left the Stanley Basin on their 900-mile journey to the ocean. But this fellow stayed behind. Biologists call it residualization, the term for a fish that does not make the long trip to the sea. It will never go through the remarkable change called smolting that converts these creatures from freshwater to saltwater fish.
What we're doing right now is trying to evaluate how many stayed here. And if a lot of them stayed here, we need to evaluate if they're having an impact on the Chinook, the wild Chinook fry.
Earlier this spring, biologists sampled the stomachs of 6,700 steelhead smolts and found their main diet was made up of insects. Possible remains of Chinook salmon fry were found in only about 10 fish.
0.1% of all the, right around 1 million steelhead smolts contained a Chinook fry. So we're talking a real small percentage.
Measurements are recorded.
It's a little over 11.
And a small clip is made on the tail.
That'll grow back. We'll be able to recognize that mark throughout the summer so that when we do a recapture, we can estimate the total number that are in here still.
Similar research is being conducted in Washington and Oregon. So far, studies show a very small percentage of salmon fry fall victim to these larger steelhead smolts. This same river carries juvenile sockeye salmon on their long journey to the sea. The trip begins in nearby Redfish Lake. For about a year after emerging from their gravel nests, the small sockeye fry call the cold waters of this mountain lake home. But early spring triggers a genetic urge to travel. They start at Redfish Lake Creek, washing downstream until they encounter this, man's attempt to save the few sockeye smolts still in existence.
Julie and I come here in the mornings to check these traps. They're set up so they pass. The larger fish, the greats, are close enough together that all we'll catch are the sockeye-sized fish. Everything else will pass on over.
The fish trap stretches across the entire stream, blocking the route to the ocean. But it's designed so that only every other bay has a trap, allowing some of the sockeye smolts to pass through naturally and continue on their way.
We're towards the end of our run. We've caught mainly just suckers today. We haven't caught any sockeye here for the last few days.
So far this spring, a total of 161 sockeye smolts were trapped. About half of them were marked with tiny computer chips called pit tags and released back into the river system to renew their journey to the ocean. The others were shipped to Fish and Game's Eagle Hatchery near Boise.
These were brought down to us about 2 weeks ago, and we're right now trying to wean them onto a pellet food. So far they've done very well.
You could call Eagle Hatchery one of the last refuges for Idaho sockeye salmon. The survivors are kept in this carefully controlled environment, pioneers in an experimental program to raise broodstock to replenish this endangered species. Here also are the offspring of the 4 adults that returned last fall to Stanley Basin. About half of those eggs, 935, were sent to another hatchery in Seattle. If any sudden catastrophic event should hit either place, such as disease or water problems, the whole brood wouldn't be lost.
They're doing really well. We probably had approximately 94% survival from egg till right now. Excellent. Now I get to show you our prize fish. Last year these fish were trapped at Redfish Lake Creek, much the same as the fish that you just saw. They came in at an average of 9.4 grams. Right now they're almost a pound a piece, which is 454 grams, and about 13.5 to 14 inches long. They've just really grown, and they're doing really well. You can see they're a healthy looking fish.
Most of this group will become sexually mature in the fall of '93. The hatchery broodstock program is an important step in saving the species, but not the answer to recovery. Whether Idaho will ever again see the amazing salmon runs of the early '60s remains a mystery.
If we can get them to the ocean and back with a decent survival rate, of course we could have a sport fishery, but the question is getting them to the ocean and back.